There's a lot of different types of contracts in the world. The most basic type of contract is a written contract, where two people agree to something and then they sign a physical written contract to record and indicate that agreement. Now, you can also have a spoken contract. If two people verbally agree to something, that actually also has legal weight. And spoken contracts can be enforced legally, just like written contracts. But we have a couple more types of contracts to think about. One is something called the social contract. Social contract ideas were created by Thomas Hobbes, and here's what he basically said. He said that if everybody had kept all of their natural freedoms, which is the freedom to do whatever you want, then we end up in a situation of war where everybody's fighting against everybody all the time. And what he said that rational people would do is voluntarily give up some of their natural rights to, in his case, a monarchy and to a king, and then that king would provide order, etc. And he called that a social contract. Now, the social contract wasn't signed. You don't sign a social contract. And it wasn't even a spoken contract. It's more like an assumed contract, right? Now, a lot of people who disagree with social contract theory, and there are quite a few people, will point out that if you haven't signed a contract or verbally agreed to it, it's not a real contract. And that's where you get memes like this with the Morpheus character saying, "What if I told you I never signed the social contract?" Now, there are other implicit contracts. These are contracts that are not written down and they're not stated, and they're just sort of assumed, okay? Now, imagine that you have two people playing tennis. And you see over here they're shaking hands because part of playing tennis is that, yes, you're opponents, but you're not absolute enemies. You're not trying to destroy the other. Now, there's no rule in tennis that says you're not allowed to, for example, call up the opponent's mom and tell the opponent's mom that the grandma is sick, and then so that the opponent is going to be all worried and play poorly. I mean, you don't sign a contract that says you're not going to do that. You don't really verbally agree that you're not going to do that. It's more just assumed that you're not going to do that because it goes against the whole idea of sports, the whole idea of sportsmanship, and in this case, tennis. It's just not the way you do things. So even though it's not a written contract, even though it's not a verbal contract that you've said out loud, it's an unwritten contract. It's an assumed contract. So we have a few different types of contracts. We have written ones, verbal ones, you have the philosophical social contract, and then a lot of times you just have contracts that are assumed.